Hello, I'm Patrice Tevis, founder of Coffee and Conversation and a licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome to our podcast, Coffee and Conversation with Black Women. I believe that anything we do for our everyday functioning to enhance it will also enhance our overall wellness. Today, we're going to be talking about how American beauty standards have affected our self-esteem, how adhering to them causes trauma in our lives and in our community. Underserved communities need to heal, and I believe that these discussions can bring about change and growth for healing. This is not about blaming, it's about learning and giving advice and moving forward and building back our self-esteem, building families, and building better communities. But I want to introduce us so that our audience will know who we are. Miss Kiana, can you tell us who you are?
Yes, so I'm Kiana Rowe. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, a friend. I work in law enforcement in a local agency in the area, and it's always been a struggle in that capacity of kind of showing up, but I'll get into that. I'm also the program manager for Coffee and Conversation. So I'm very, very happy to be here, very happy to really talk about this topic because it is a thing that we struggle with.
And my name is Sharon Miller. And like Kiana said, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an auntie, I'm a cousin, a friend and all that. And I'm a retired parole agent. Can I say that?
Yeah.
I'm a retired state parole officer and part of Coffee and Conversation as the social worker. And like Kiana said, I'm proud to be here. Looking forward to learning even more from what I hear from my own sisters, because a lot of times we don't sit around and talk about these same issues. So I think what Patrice has come up with for today has been perfect.
Miss Ruby?
Yes, I'm Ruby Davis, and I also work in a public arena. I help developmentally disabled children and their families get goods and services that they need. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
So, ladies, what do you think about the trauma that you might have felt adhering to American beauty standards all of our lives?
That's a tough one. I think oftentimes it's this constant chase, if you will, to sometimes get something that may never be attainable. It's exhausting.
Exactly.
It's exhausting how you try to morph yourself, not show up as your full present self because you are trying to adhere to something that was never even ever about you. Right. From our hair to our weight,
color. Yes.
Our color, all these things. It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Because as we grow up, all we see on magazines, on television, is how we should look, how our hair should be. It should be straight. The color of our eyes, they make us even appear as though we should not look the way we look.
Absolutely. And you're just really bombarded. Like when you think about just the media, you're just bombarded with images that you don't ever, they don't look like you. So you're not represented there. I have three baby girls that I'm raising, and finding dolls, finding things that affirm them have always been difficult because it's just that it's hard to find. It's hard to find.
Right. When I was younger, I felt my prettiest when my hair swung. Now, my hair was never meant to swing. But I was running around there with the pajama bottoms hanging on my head and swinging my hair, imitating something that was never meant for me, that was never meant to be. And even in terms of being a 6'1" woman, okay, I grew up taller than most of the men, taller than everybody, and didn't fit into a standard, because never do you see beautiful couples on television or in magazines where she's 2 feet taller than him. Right. It doesn't work like that. Right. And even adults at that time would look up like this and say, oh, how tall you gonna be? And it kind of made me feel a little freakish and a little unsure of myself. And it really damages to some degree your self-esteem because you don't know your own beauty, struggling or searching for somebody else's beauty. And so, I think that we still struggle with this.
What would you say, like we talk about self-esteem or beauty, and I'm just looking at all you women and I'm looking at your natural hair. Like this is kind of a topic that we, that's really kind of in the forefront. Like we're seeing a transformative culture right now where Black women are saying no and they are going natural. And I'm looking at you, Ru, because you have beautiful locks. Like what made you decide to kind of just say, or have you always been natural, or what made you kind of transition to locks?
I always wanted to be natural with the locks, and I attempted it in the 80s, but I wasn't sure how to approach it. So it didn't turn out so good. But once I realized how to actually get it started and maintain it, then I went for it. But for me, it was just comfort. I kept seeking a place where I would be comfortable. I wasn't comfortable with perms and blow dryers and hot curlers every day. It was taking way too much time, way too much money. And it felt like I was going against the grain of who I was. Right. Once I realized how to embrace a natural hairstyle, because I wore an afro for years, even as an adult, really short, like 1-inch afro. So that was very comfortable for me, but I really always admired the beauty of dreadlocks.
So I want to tell you guys a little story. Years ago, I was working as an aerobics instructor in Sacramento, and because I was doing 4 classes a day, aerobics classes a day. That's a lot, but I was in some real good shape. Anyway, the grandson of the owner came to me. I had to put my hair in the braids because that sweating and shrinking it, and all that was natural hair. He came to me one day and he said, "Hey, I got to talk to you. You're really doing a good job, but guess what? We don't allow militant hairstyles in this establishment."
Wow.
Now, I was a college student. I was excited about my job, and he just made me feel militant. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I was the furthest thing from militant. And he said, if you don't take those braids out, you have to go.
Wow.
So I lost my job. And I remember when I left, I thought, how did he get to decide for me how I show up, even when I'm doing a good job? And the fact that I never forgot that story tells you that it still resonates to some degree that, nobody repairs us. We have one experience after another. The Crown Act became an act in California and other states because it was necessary, because, we'd go in job interviews and they were saying that our hair would be a distraction in the workplace and that sort of thing. If you have to swallow this type of rhetoric and message for years and years and years, what do you do with it? Where do you go with it? How do you figure out what your own value is the question.
Wow. Well, that's real difficult because I look at my mother, and she never had to straighten her hair. She never had to perm her hair. And so as we grew up, every Saturday morning, you're sitting in the kitchen with a hot comb, and she sat there and she straightened your hair out. And I hated it. It was like, why you always got to straighten out my hair? Why you got to do this? But we had to have our hair straight. And then not until I got to high school is when I said, I want to wear an afro. And I was allowed to then wear an afro. And I followed that same pattern with my own daughters. I always was straightening their hair, making their hair straight.
Right.
And then my daughters got to the point where both of them now are completely natural.
Right.
And with their daughters, they refuse to straighten their hair. Their hair has always been natural. Right. So a lot of it comes with, our upbringing and where we come from and who has given us the direction on what we should do and how we should be.
Right. I think subconsciously, we may not know it, but we're looking or we're seeking approval and acceptance because we believe that's what we need to be accepted.
So, but I think we're not even conscious of that.
I know.
I don't even think we even know that that's our direction.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
So And just taking a little step back, you mentioned he said you can no longer work here. And so you lost your job. Like
Yes.
that was, we're talking college. I don't know how long. What,
Hey.
5 years ago? 5 years ago.
5 years ago, you know it.
But so how did you navigate that? Did you continue to wear braids? Did you say, oh, I'm no longer doing aerobics, so I don't have to? Was the hairstyle because of your, and I think you mentioned because of what you
It's
did.
because of the job.
So as you continue to move forward and you left that, did you continue? Because you're natural now. What
Right.
was the path for you? And how did you, what was that?
I continued with the braids because I was working. I had a child and I was in college. I was busy, so it was an easy way to not have to fool around with my hair.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did to me emotionally, that somebody could walk up and say, basically what he said to me was, "You're not good enough. That hairstyle makes you not good enough." Now, who in our society who gets to make that rule up? And who gets to have to adhere to it? Because I was walking to my car thinking that. And he was like, to me, a kid too.
Right.
But he had a right to say that when he said, it's not allowed in this establishment, like you don't bring that here. And it was a hairstyle, ladies.
That's crazy.
So I could do my job.
But I think it's people's own lack of understanding cultures. And if I don't understand what goes on in your culture, then how is it that that it could be acceptable for mine? If that makes sense.
I know, yeah.
You know, because if I've never seen anyone wear afro, I mean, there's times when I've walked in the store and kids will, because like you said, 6'1", they look at me, and then if my hair is natural, they look at me. And I'll never forget going to the state fair. I have a granddaughter, biracial, and she's really fair. She has blue eyes, but she has, I would say, kinky hair, what they call it kinky hair. And her mom had her hair pulled up, and it was, excuse me, an Afro puff. And this lady walked over, and she wanted to touch. She said, "Is it okay if I touch her hair?" And her mom said, "No, you can't touch her hair." And she said, "I just want to see what it feels like." So it's I would say the ignorance of not knowing and how it actually affects us as African American women or just African American people to identify us not just by our color, but by our hair and our hairstyles, thinking it should be like theirs.
Do you guys feel, I want to ask this to Ruby, do you feel that we should educate them? That we should allow them to touch our hair? That we should have a conversation about something that pertains to how you're making us feel when you do these things?
Absolutely, I think we should be open to educating and informing people about our choices, our culture. A lot of people have strayed away from ourselves getting in touch with what we're about.
True.
And where we come from.
Right.
So it's really difficult to get outsiders to embrace and welcome how we are, what we do. And there is a real downside, which is when people feel so bad about themselves.
I agree.
Sometimes they take their own lives.
I agree.
You know,
Right.
so it's a chain reaction.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
not everyone is strong enough to withstand, oh man, touch your hair.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Because it kind of makes us feel like we're so different. We're freakish, we're weird,
Right.
we're odd.
right.
You know?
Or a child looking up and exaggerating your height, you know.
Or an adult.
Adult, yeah,
Right.
they
Well,
do
that's
it all
another-
the
They do it
time
all the
too.
time.
But yeah.
So I
it's-
want to make sure we talk about, okay, the call to action before we end this podcast. What do we do? How do we send the message in our communities and beyond that we are not our hair, we are not our skin color, we are not just African Americans, we're just people, we're just like everybody else in so many ways. How do we send the message so that we can start having healthier relationships with ourselves?
Well, you know, the music is out there. The literature has been out there for hundreds of years. And people have made an attempt to expose the general public about, you know, who we are and what we're about and our struggles and our struggle just to have a place on this earth, in this society, even though we help build this society. So the information is out there, but you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink.
Right.
So that is a very good question. Right. I think we just got to keep doing what we're doing.
True.
I mean, media is everywhere. So the images that we put out there have to be important. They can't just be a feeling. It has to be something concrete that people can recognize and say, oh, so that's where that came from, you know.
So how do the question again? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I'm understanding.
How do we change this? We present a problem, a concern.
Right.
What do we do? I mean, basically, we can't undo it. But how do we send a positive message to not only the community, but to ourselves? Because the change has to start with us. Every African-American woman who has ever been subject to this, or your young daughters who may be subject to this, how do you send the message to them, to all of society, that this is traumatic for us often, this hairstyle issue? We want it to basically go away. We know it's not going to go away, but we have to do something. We have to say something. That's why we're having this conversation today, because it does do a lot of damage to us. So how do we be the change?
I think it comes with your self-esteem, your own self-esteem. We as women, we have to heal first. You and I have this conversation all the time. We have to heal, because if I'm not healthy, how can I make my children healthy? Right. How can I make my daughter feel good about who she is and the decisions that she's making when it comes to her own identity?
Right.
So we have to be loving to ourselves before we can be loving to someone else.
And stop sending the message forward. The old message, the old pressing your hair message.
Exactly.
Let's let them know that they are beautiful with their natural kinky hair.
Exactly.
Correct.
And I'll say one other thing along with that. A lot of it has to do with how our men in our society, in the society, how they see us, because they've been damaged as well.
Right.
And because they want to see us look a certain way as well because of the damage that has been done to them. And we have to, like you said, send that message to them as well, that this is beautiful, we are beautiful, and we are beautiful in our own culture. And this is just how we are.
I think there's certainly the self-esteem piece. And I think there's being okay with who you are, however you choose to be, I think, is when I think about my babies right now, what would I want to say? Because I don't think there's anything wrong with straightening it.
No.
If that's what you want. And
if you're healthy.
And I say it because I go either way. Sometimes I want to flat iron it. Sometimes I want to have it, whatever.
Right. You get
but I
choices.
think the biggest thing is that being younger, my pretty was when it was like you were talking about straight. It's like, okay, it's Easter. We got to get my hair straightened.
Right.
It's that's your good look. You can't be having it.
Right.
But I think what we've come to know now, certainly with the Crown Act we've spoken about, certainly with having the variety that we have, is that we get to choose, really. Yes. I get to choose. You don't get to make that choice for me. So how do I pour that into my babies, that if you want to cut it short? I remember going to the barber, getting mine faded because I loved it short. I'm looking out I'm looking at your beautiful hair because I remember getting mine, faded. And then I'm okay with this too. So for me, the call to action is be okay. And you get to make the choice for yourself. Society doesn't get to say if it's straight, if it's faded, if it's orange, purple. Who are you, Kiana? How do I show up as my best self? How do I not let the outside things impact me and take me away from who I am? So this is like,
it's a lot.
This is a lot of stuff.
But that's why we need to have these conversations. We do book clubs. We need to be talking about things that help us heal sometimes too. But like she said, because suicide is high in our culture.
Indeed. And what does it look like? We're sitting here in community, because I think it's so important to have people in your space. God made us. Well, I don't want to take us off. We were made for community. And
yes,
so
we were.
how do we make sure that we surround ourselves with people who affirm us as well? And so that I think is important. I have my self-esteem, but I need my sister over here sometimes to affirm that in
Yes,
me.
right.
Call someone out of where they really are, even though they're not, all these things. So put yourself in community to where you can be affirmed with people that are safe. I think that's helpful.
And be
in building you up.
affirming.
And be
Right,
affirming.
yes.
Indeed. Indeed.
Exactly.
That kind of rolls around too. Also, when you say put yourself, it also rolls back to segregation. You know, if we're only going to surround ourselves with people that are willing to accept the way we dress, the way we wear our hair, what we eat, how we, do things in the world, then that's separatism. We're never going to be integrated into the whole of society if we continue to only live in our communities, only be accepted by our people. And it's just so difficult that individualism is like almost unacceptable,
Well, I think it's, and I don't want to assume that when I say community means people that are like me and that look like me. My best people in my community are completely 180s from me. But what I mean is people who love you. Black, if they're black, white, it doesn't
There
matter.
you go.
People who love you, who care about you, that affirm you,
Yes.
but not necessarily that are like me. So I wanted to make myself clear with that one. But I just think surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your individuality,
Yes.
who celebrate your differences, who pour into you and give you positive affirmations. And so that's what I meant when I say community.
So I think we probably need to wrap it up. I just think that taking the time to focus on something that causes us pain. We don't do that. We're busy. We never stop. We never have these conversations. Many of us, when we started talking about this today, we got stuck like, oh, wow, because we don't focus on these things. And we should take the time. Like, this is a form of community. You talking with your husband, your significant other, my significant other, having these conversations about affirmation, expectations, feelings. We don't solve the problem in a day, but it's a start. And so what I want to say is thank you, ladies, for participating, for being brave enough to have a conversation that's difficult, that makes you feel a little transparent. We have to keep doing this. This is the first Black Women Are Talking podcast from Coffee and Conversation. And I just want to say, we're going to end this for now, but we'll be back. and you do it well.
do.
Before
Thank
we
you.
move forward,